As y'all know, this is our first time, at least my first time, doing a coffee class for everybody. I will tell you right now, I am a little nervous because I am that person who's not necessarily want to be in front of the camera. But as I woke up this morning, my daughter Nala was like, "Daddy, you're excited about doing this?" And I was like, actually I am, because I had to already brew my first cup this morning. Got my personal dream cup. For those who know me, I'm a dreamer and a visionary by heart. And I realized as I'm brewing a simple cup of coffee this morning, I'm like, wow, all the little tricks and things that I've learned and tips over the years, it comes second nature. And I really am excited to share this with other people. And why? Because I believe everybody, when you brew that first cup in the morning, it's your time. And so how do you really have that magical cup so that when you start your day, it's the best cup for you? So today, we're actually going to be able to start. We're going to show you how to make the perfect cup for you, and that's really at the heart of Beyu, and that's what Beyu is about. That's why I started this company, because I really believe the cafe itself was a place where you can come and be you, but coffee's been around for well over 1,000 years, and because of that, I want to make sure that you can enjoy coffee the way that I do. So thank you all so much for joining in. And let's get ready to go through. So, by the way, I do have a helper that's going to be helping me today. Shannon, you will not see her. She always operating behind the scenes, but she may be helping me with turning the cameras here and there. So, I don't know if Shannon wants to say hello, but no, okay, not today. But so just so you know, today we're going to be testing out two types of coffees. The two coffees we're going to be trying out are going to be our Kenya O Kenya, which you see here, and also our dark roast, which is Say It Loud, Dark and Proud. And the Kenya O Kenyan is a medium roast, and the Say It Loud, Dark and Proud is a dark roast. We wanted to make sure we could let you test out both a dark roast and a medium roast so you can really see the difference between the two coffees and how they taste. On display here, you can see already in terms of just the color. Now I know some of you may already know this, but for those who don't, one of the things when you're choosing your coffee at the grocery store and you're going out saying like, okay, what kind of coffee do I want to get? Knowing whether you like a dark roast or a medium roast says a lot. And also looking at the color of them to make sure that it fits the flavor profile. So if you see a coffee that's more on the medium side and they're calling it a dark roast, you might want to get another bag. So that's where we're going to kind of get started today. So these are going to be the two coffees that we're roasting. And as we go through the process of grinding our coffee, where you can do both whole bean and ground. So we're going to do two different processes today. We're going to do your typical coffee pot, and we're going to do a French press. So the goal is to help those of you who are beginners who just want to brew a perfect cup. And then for those of you who want to take it the next step up, let's say, you want to do a French press and elevate your coffee game. And that's where you want to start getting into whole bean and how you want to ground your coffee. Also, how you do that, whether you want to use a scale or a scoop, that's going to be another little level and a tip between those of you who want to step your game up to a pro level versus just making sure you still brew a perfect cup of coffee. So let's get started. Oh, and one last thing too. We're actually going to be doing a little bit of showing you how to even make some milk froth at home. So this way, if you want to do a latte or a cafe au lait, you can actually do that at home with some really simple low-cost tools. So just FYI. And stay tuned for a special offer later on, because as you know, all of this is about us being able to launch BUcoffee.com this past Tuesday, on Giving Tuesday. And we're excited because of that. Now you can get any of these coffees online. And as you know, proceeds go towards the BU Food Project to make sure we're tackling food insecurity, which, we've done, 100,000 individual meals since COVID started, 75,000 pounds of food that we've been able to serve. So just so you know, every time you buy a bag of coffee at BU, it really is going to a good cause. So let's get started. So I'm going to kind of turn over a little bit. Shannon's going to help me out over here. And we're going to kind of show you a little bit of the different of the makeup where, again, you got, a French press, which is going to kind of take it the next step up in terms of how you brew your coffee. and then of course your coffee pot. Now, for those who don't know what a French press is, believe it or not, man, this is like the old school way, traditional way of how you make coffee. So if I take out kind of this plunger, it's nothing but an empty cup and what I kind of call a plunger filter feature that you push it down to filter out the grounds in your coffee. Back in the days when coffee was, most people know that coffee was discovered in Ethiopia. And so from Ethiopia and Africa, it migrated north up into what's now modern day Turkey, but back then was all of Arabia. And so Arabia is where it really flourished. And they held on to coffee for like over 600 years until like the Dutch actually was able to steal a coffee plant. And then it just flourished all throughout Europe. But back in that time, this is actually how they would kind of brew coffee in a different way. You would basically get coffee beans. So imagine getting some regular coffee beans. They would pull them from the plant, put them out in the sun, which is how they roast it, and they would just grind them up. And as they ground them up, because the grounds were really large, they would put the grounds in a cup, pour hot water into it, stir it up, and in a couple of minutes, they would push the coffee all the way down to the bottom so that all you're left with is the coffee inside your French press. And so this is one of the traditional ways of how you can really drink coffee in a different way other than just a coffee pot that's going to really give you just a nice, bold, full of flavor. And I tell our team, the best way to think about it is half and half to skim milk. If you drink skim milk versus half and half, you can taste the thickness of the cream compared to skim milk. That's what you get. This is your half and half. This is like skim milk. So if you want to take a bolder flavor in coffee, that's why I recommend trying to French press next. So first thing we're going to do, I'm going to turn the screen back over, is we're going to start with two processes. So today we're going to be doing our Say It Loud, Dark and Proud is what we're going to use for the French press, and our Kenya O Kenya is what we're going to use for the coffee pot. So I'm actually going to go ahead and open the bag and go ahead and scoop some coffee beans out so we can get this going. And for those of y'all can't see this, but these scissors, man, it's so tight trying to get it open because my son Xavier, he loves taking my scissors out of my office to cut open his little ice pops. And who knew, after about 60 days, my scissors are like the stickiest from ice pop flavor and ice pop juice in years. So one tool I'll recommend if you don't already have is a coffee scoop. Almost every bag you go to, they'll recommend 2 tablespoons of coffee per 6 ounces of water. So that's kind of the standard, but depending on how much you love your coffee, I typically do 5 ounces. My wife is the same way. Nisha loves doing 5 ounces. Some people will kind of go 7, especially if it's a strong roast and it's a little too dark. So say you get a dark roast and it turns out it's a little too strong for you, then you actually want to increase the water. And the reason this is important, one of the biggest secrets to brewing a great cup of coffee is knowing the coffee to water ratio. That's why basically every bag talks about, how much coffee you're putting with your ounces of water. Pro tip, when you decide to move from scooping out your coffee to weighing, that's going to be the next level. The reason being is every coffee is a different size. So I don't know if you can actually see these, but these Kenyan coffees versus this blend of Say It Loud, Dark and Roast, they're a different size. And so because coffee weighs differently, you actually decide that you want to end up weighing your coffee because you may need more coffee depending on where the coffee is coming from. So believe it or not, the international standard is to weigh your coffee. And so we're going to be doing the weigh method when we do our French press, but then the traditional scoop method in terms of brewing our daily cup. And again, scoop is fine. So we're actually going to go ahead and scoop out our coffee for today. So what I did is I went ahead and did enough for me and some friends. So when you do your scoop, again, I know this might be kind of standard, but you typically just want to have 1 simple scoop. A lot of people will say you want to measure it off. You can, but it's not that important. So I always say just go ahead and get you enough coffee in the scoop so that it's basically nice and level. So this is 2 scoops, and I'm telling you right now, I am that dude that by the time I get to like number 3, I do sometimes might lose count and I end up having to start over again. But again, so you're not alone. Let's see, 4. I don't know. By the way, does anyone have any questions right now based on kind of this beginning process of how you're brewing coffee? Because again, one of the things about this is, see, I'm about to lose count again as I try to talk. This is number 4, 5, let's see, 6, and then 7's coming, last one. So the other thing that I thought about with doing this virtual event, because as I said before, man, I might be a little nervous about, you know, the way of this new world now going virtual, because I think when COVID happened, and again, owning a restaurant, having, Beyu Blue Coffee at Duke University, our downtown cafe, man, it was rough those first couple of, it's been rough since, but the immediate 30 days was just unforgettable. And it's something that, we'll never forget. But what was interesting was by day number 45, you don't realize we're in this business because we really love talking to people. And so not being able to just see people and talk to people, go up to the tables and the cafe, yeah, it was rough. And I noticed it started hitting a lot of us in this business. So yeah, it's really cool to still be able to interact in this new way. And I'm learning, even as a business owner, we're definitely moving into a different time that I guess this is the way we have to connect. And so even for me, who doesn't want to be on a camera or anything like that, but if this is kind of the way we're connecting, yeah, let me adjust and adapt to new things. And so I hope, you'll be open to adapting to a new way of enjoying coffee. Oh, and by the way, I do have a little bit of Bailey's Jameson Irish Cold Brew, which came out this year, which is amazing. And of course, Kahlua, that I will also show you how you can use for some great coffee beverages towards the end. So do know it will still be fun. I might have had a little bit of mine this morning. And so one thing someone had asked about, how long do ground coffee stays fresh? That's a great question. So one of the things I forgot to mention is that storage. Another secret about coffee. This right here is what I use for holding our coffee beans when we get them in. You want to make sure when you get your coffee, you want to store it in a dark container. You'll see a lot of places they'll try to do in a plastic see-through, and that's great for display if they're whole bean. But once you get those coffees, you want to get them in a dark container, because the longer it's exposed to sunlight, the quicker your coffee is going to lose its flavor and change very quickly. So it's highly recommended you do not keep coffee in anything that will absorb light. You also don't want to keep it in the refrigerator either. I know that's been something that was kind of touted, back in the day of, keep your coffee in the refrigerator. Believe it or not, that cold air, and it actually takes away the flavor of the coffee. It ends up absorbing some of the flavor profiles in your refrigerator, and so your coffee will end up changing its flavor profile. But typically, you can hold ground coffee till about, I would say at most 3 months is like, and that's, coffee geeks will say you don't ever want to have ground coffee more than 3 days a week. But really, as long as it's in an air-sealed tight container, you can generally enjoy coffee for up to 3 months. So April, thank you for your question, by the way, on that one. So we are, actually, no, I did 7 scoops on this one. So right now we're actually doing, we already weighed out 42 ounces of water for the coffee pot. So I'm actually gonna get the water now. So thank God my kids allowed me to use their container that they normally use for their juice. So I'm actually pouring this inside our coffee pot here. Thank you, Shannon. So the other thing about water, right? This is one of those other little things that what kind of water should you use? When I go on vacation, gosh, it's been so long. Well, actually, just came back from Blowing Rock. First time my wife and I were able to get away since COVID. And one thing that we always was important when we get away and think about the water quality when we get away and we have coffee is we always think about what is going to be the quality of water. Depending on where we go, even if sometimes it's out of the country, we will use bottled water for our water if we're going to use something in the room. So if you have great tap water, great, especially like when we're in the mountains, the water was great. But a lot of times I recommend using filtered water out of your refrigerator. If you have a filtration system, and again, most refrigerators have filtered water. Otherwise, you can use bottled water, or again, you can even boil it and let it cool down. But again, having great water quality is really one of those little things that people don't tell you. It really makes a difference in your coffee. Jasmine, you asked Janine asking optimal water temperature. Great question. Typically, when you're starting to brew coffee, it's almost the same when we're steaming milk for an espresso beverage. We always tell our baristas to steam milk up to 160 to 180 degrees. That's typically what I would recommend for coffee. You normally don't want to get higher than 180 degrees. So that's kind of where I recommend. When you're making a French press, and right now we have some water that was boiling, that we now have it down simmering, so we can bring that temperature back down. You can use boiling water and then just let it sit for about a good 5 minutes to bring that down, or just don't put it on a quiet boil. Once you start hearing that little bit of sound where you feel like it's right at between around 180, that's where you want to be at for your coffee temperature. So here we poured our water in and pull out the brew basket. Again, very simple. We did our scoops. And now we're ready to go. Now, what's funny about this process that people don't realize, the water's already in here. Our ground coffee is in. Believe it or not, there's a difference when I talk about people who are coffee purists versus those who just love coffee. If you love really great coffee and you're on the go, you're just that person who's always, I gotta go, I don't have time, you can do this the night before. Like taking the time to just measure out your coffee, measure out your water, so when you come in the morning, you just press the button and go. Man, I did that I remember I went to a period, I did that for at least a year to 2 years. Because again, you just don't have the time to really take in the morning, but you still want great coffee. So you can buy ground coffee, scoop it out, have the water ready, and just be ready and push the button in the morning. And I share that tip because that's a really great way for those of you who are on the go but still want to have a great coffee. Now getting to a point where I really want to take that time for me and kind of go through the process of my ritual, then that's kind of what we're doing today. So this is brewing right now. Simple button. And some of you may have a coffee pot that allows you to like turn a switch on. So with this one, for example, it is a push button, but all of them are the same. The irony about every coffee pot is it's no different than when you go to a coffee shop, that you basically have some sort of brew basket. They call it a basket that you're going to brew the coffee in. That's what we just put on the side. You put your coffee in the filter, you put it inside the brew basket, and then you have the place that kind of your chamber that holds the water. And so when it basically fills, when the water kind of gets over all the coffee and it goes down into the coffee pot, that process is the process for coffee almost no matter where you go, even espresso. Espresso machines, and espresso is nothing but this, but using high pressure and high temperature when making espresso. I think Shani said there was one other question, which I missed that one from, good question. Alicia, what's the ratio? The ratio is 2 tablespoons of coffee per 6 ounces of water. That's the basics you want to start from. From there, depending on your taste preference, you want to add more water or take away water by an ounce. So either 5 ounces or 7 ounces. Go down, you use less water if you want a stronger cup. and you use a little more water if you want kind of a milder coffee. And again, you can get one of these simple 2 tablespoon scoops for, again, $5, under $10 on Amazon. And also, for those of you who ask, you can go to beyucoffee.com to purchase our coffee, BEYUCOFFEE.com. On the real though, that would have been real embarrassing, right, if I misspelled coffee, but we ain't gonna tell anybody, but I'm glad I got that right. So what French press brand do you recommend? From, I hope I said Adela. That is a great question. Man, I remember going into some of these places that sell the most expensive French presses for like, I mean, 60, 70, $80. Now, for those who love coffee, French presses is a great gift for the holiday season to give someone who loves coffee. So if you want to spend money on a French press, do it because it's a gift. You somebody who loves coffee. But for the pure enjoyment of coffee, man, whether it's a plastic one, a metal, it really is about just get the best value. Because yeah, with French presses in terms of, I will say, typically I do like the metal or the metal French presses over the plastic. A lot of it is just because they conserve heat a little bit longer. The plastic tends to cool down faster. So that would probably be the only difference, is what is used to make the French press. So if you're doing your research on French presses, just see the type of material that's used to see how long it can conserve heat. You know, coffee pots are great because as you use the coffee pots, it can stay on a warmer and stay hot for a longer period of time. So now that we have this brewing, we're actually going to go over and do a French press. So with the French press, you would actually do it the same way. A lot of times you can actually order your coffee ground in a French press manner if you don't already have a grinder. But now we're going to start getting into a little bit of some tips to take the coffee to the next level. 2 things to do that. 1, a grinder. So the grinder that I have right here is a Cuisinart grinder. Man, my wife and I, we've had this for, oh God, at least 4 years, easy. And I remember when I first started, I had a very simple grinder, and it was like a push button grinder. And you put the coffee beans in, you push the button, it grinds it, and you have to stop it. The difference in the grinders is that it allows you to choose how you want to choose the grounds of your coffee. The way I explain it to our staff is, think about rocks and think about sand. You can grind coffee in those 2 ways. So we tell our staff, if you put a pound of rocks on top of each other inside of a cup, and you pour the water over these pounds of rocks, the water's just going to fall through the rocks. But if I put sand and I pack it nice and tight and I pour water on top of the sand, it's going to take a while for it to go through, if at all, and it's going to drip out. That's the difference between coffee grounds. Coarse and fine are the 2 types of grinding methods. Coarse is like rocks, fine is like sand. So for those of you who love espresso, espresso is automatically ground in a fine setting, because that's what espresso is. It's really fine coffee grounds that mixes with water at high temperature, which is why you only get those little bit of 2 to 3 ounces of espresso. I always say, if you look at coffee as the margarita, espresso will be the tequila. So that's when you're looking at that. And then also on the coarse side, coarse is what you want to use, more like rocks, you want to use for your French press. Because as you start mixing up your coffee, this is what we call this is the filter, really, is that when you actually push this down and you're pushing the coffee down to the bottom, when you push the coffee, what you're left with is the coffee mixture that becomes coffee. That's all it is. It's coffee grounds that's mixed with the water, and you're left with coffee. If you have the coffee too fine, like espresso, it's going to seep through these holes and you're going to have grinds in your mouth. So you don't need the coffee to be as fine. That's why a grinder allows you to establish the setting you want based on using a French press or using a coffee pot. And that's just for today. There are all sorts of equipment. You have people who love doing the the pour overs, which are pretty popular now. You can do cold brew. getting a grinder is just a great investment because you can just start doing all sorts of things. I think April, you had asked if we ship. Yes, we do. We actually have a special right now. It's free shipping right now on all coffee through December 15th, just so you know. And Destiny, I'm sorry, that was Destiny that asked that question. Shannon still won't say anything, y'all, but that's okay. I still feel like I'm talking to myself, but yeah, we'll roll with it. So while we're doing this, I have, y'all can clown me, but I actually had to watch like a couple of Rachel Ray shows because I'm like, how in the world are you supposed to kind of talk to people and go through these, go through this whole coffee class? So I want to give a shout out to Rachel Ray thank you for letting me know what a coffee class could look like, especially who's really, really funny. So next level is, like I say, once you get your grind setting right, you can still go ahead and start grinding your coffee for the French press. But another pro tip is weighing out your coffee. Now, this one is, and I know, I'm going to tell y'all right now, this is where y'all can clown me next time y'all see me about Dorian is a coffee snob. I'm officially there. Why? Because I have now moved into the realm of weighing out my coffee every morning. It gets on my wife's nerves. So depending on who wakes up first, that is what's going to determine who makes the coffee. And by the way, the grinder that I'm using is a Cuisinart grinder. And so in what grind setting do I use? Great question. So, you know what? I'm actually going to unplug this and bring this closer and I'll plug it back in. So it did have a little drop. So there was a little crack in here, but because it's plastic, it's okay. But right here, you might be able to see, Terry, I think you asked the question, what grind setting do you use? So if you notice, you have the auto drip in the middle, you have French press, and you have espresso. And if you were to ever go into a coffee shop, you'll see the same thing. Man, next time y'all go in, y'all gonna see those big old Bun grinder. Bun, by the way, is a great company to use for coffee. Now they do a lot of commercial equipment, but I think they do some home equipment. But Bun is a great choice that we use in the commercial side. Again, all coffee shops, restaurants, everybody loves Bun. Their grinders, and that's what they're known for, are spectacular. And on those grinders, they have the same pictures. They have auto drip and several others, but you can grind your setting all the way from fine, which is espresso, all the way over to coarse, which will be French press. And so depending on your level of taste, and that's the cool thing is, you want to start, if you're going to do a French press, you clearly want to start in the coarse range. So day one, you start in this range. Maybe it tastes you want it a little darker. Before you add more coffee, you can adjust your grinds. And so if you think about it, just the basic science of it, if you have more coffee that's finer, like, say, like we talked about with espresso, if you're turning it this way and you're adjusting your setting, so you can typically these things. So I'm sorry, I'll go through a little bit more on this. So with a grinder, you have these two, what they call burrs. The burrs are, you ever seen like those shows like drilling, when people are drilling in soil and dirt and they're just spinning, and they're drilling inside the soil. Well, you have these two burr grinders that are just turning and turning and turning, and that's what's grinding the coffee. And as you click this thing to either coarse or to espresso, the burrs are either coming together or they're coming apart. So that's how you're able to establish whether you want something that's fine or you want something that's coarse. So when you are brewing your coffee, when you're grinding your coffee, depending on your setting, like for us, we brew our coffee every morning. We set ours on 9. 9 is the setting that we start with on auto drip when we're brewing just a regular cup of coffee in our coffee pot. For French press though, I tend to go on this particular grinder, 15. And again, when it comes to a grinder, it's probably less about sometimes the brand and more about the reviews and the features. This one I'll also show had a start, stop, and a manual button. So the reason I love the manual piece is like right now, because I'm weighing out my coffee, the cups may not match what's on here. And that's actually another very important tip. A lot of people will say, they'll look at the coffee pot and the coffee pot will say, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or the the coffee pot will kind of either tell you either when you're pouring the water in or you're using the actual coffee pot itself about how many cups those are. Well, their cup does not equate to your cup. What does that mean? So if the proper ratio should be 6 ounces per 2 tablespoons for 1 cup of coffee, yet if you're going by the coffee pot, their cup might be 5 ounces, it might be 7 ounces, it might be 8 ounces. You just never know. So that's why I would encourage you to never go by the number of cups that are listed on your coffee pot, but you do your own measurement. So we've measured out enough for 20 ounces because we used a 20-ounce French press for this one. So I'm actually going to plug this back in. Shannon, you said there was another question. What was that question? This was from Hansi. Cool. Hans. Oh, cool. What ratio do you use for a mocha pot? Ah, good question. So if I'm thinking about a mocha pot as kind of an espresso pot, if I'm understanding you correctly, that you use over your stove. And if that's the case, you actually still use the same ratio. So to your point, Hans, thank you for correcting me. When using a scale, getting into the pro tip piece, the international standards, because again, the U.S. uses ounces. Everywhere else, every place else in the world mostly uses grams. And so because we use ounces and everyone else uses grams, the international standards tends to work in grams. And so it's always crazy. I'm always having to convert over to ounces and grams. And so we're actually going to send you either on, I think you can do it on the link, right, Shannon? We're going to send you a site that will convert ounces into grams. So Hans, if you're trying to figure out what you want to use for a mocha pot or an espresso pot, it's still the same ratio, which is 1 gram of water. I'm sorry, 1 gram of coffee per 17 grams of water. And I know that's crazy because it's like, wait, dude, we're going from ounces to gram. But yes, and that goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Because coffee weighs, different coffee beans weigh differently. I know that's redundant, but because they're all different sizes, by using weight, you can get a consistent brew. So you would want to use that for your mocha pot. I would actually encourage you to get a scale and start weighing out your coffee. And so when you're doing your weigh out, I actually use that conversion, the converter website, conversion link that, Shannon, can you help us by uploading that? So this is a great link. Y'all, I know it's, again, coffee snob moment. I use this link every morning and I should have memorized, but while memorizing, I can just go to the link. So I know I want to do, say, 36 ounces of water. I will enter 36 ounces into this little conversion. And for those of you who don't have your computer up, I'll show you what it looks like. 'Cause this thing is really dope. But it's as simple as this. I see that. So, yep. So all you do is enter the ounces that you want to put in there. And so in this case, we did 16 ounces. I put it in and I'm going to press convert. And it's going to tell me I need 473 grams of water. So because that's what I've done, now I'm just simply going to do 473 divided by 17. And I'm then going to get 27 ounces, 27 grams of coffee. So that's what I did. I measured out my coffee on the scale, and now we're going to put it inside our grinder to get ready to weigh out. April, you asked a great question. What setting do you use for Turkish coffee? Great question. Turkish coffee is actually within the fine settings of espresso. So for those of you who have not had Turkish coffee, one of our neighbors on 9th Street, International Delights, Ahmed, man, I know him and his father since I was a student at Duke. I love International Delights. They do an amazing Turkish coffee and a great Philly chicken sandwich, by the way. And I remember drinking their Turkish coffee and really having appreciation for just the culture of drinking just good Turkish coffee. And it's condensed. So like it's a little bit more coffee than espresso, but you typically want to set that on a finer setting, which in this case if you're thinking about, let's say auto drip, and you would go to say espresso normal to Turkish coffee will be a little bit further over. So you definitely want it on a finer side if you're gonna do Turkish coffee. And I love these questions. People are asking about the grind setting. This one's from Roxanne. What size grind for a pour over? That's a great question. So for a typical pour over, because you're looking at you're basically using an like brewing coffee, basically, you're actually wanting more on the auto drip side. So for a pour over, you're going to be more on the auto drip towards very close to espresso. So another tip that they don't tell you about in coffee is how long the water mixes with coffee. That is important. Think about espresso machine, your coffee pot, a pour over, and a K-cup machine. Now, anybody who's had a K-cup, you know that thing is done in like 30 seconds, which is basically the same as espresso, which is 27 seconds. Did y'all know a K-cup is really nothing but an at-home espresso machine? So believe it or not, if you really want an espresso machine, if you can get you a really good K-cup, you can adjust the settings in your K-cup. You got an espresso machine, really. So, and you can control how much coffee you put in. So that's another little tip, by the way. You can pay hundreds of dollars for an espresso machine, or you can just get a really nice K-cup. So using a K-cup, though, for 30 seconds versus a pour over, and you're pouring it over, the best way to do a pour over and sticking to I'll say like a little bit on a finer auto drip setting, you'll want to pour over all parts of that the coffee, because you want the water to get into all of the coffee, to soak it all up. And you want to let it sit for a second. So you typically would do it for about 10 seconds, and then you want to kind of let it hold out for a little bit so it can soak up all that water, and then continue to go over again. That's really important when you start thinking about how do you get the water to mix in all of this coffee. So while this is grinding real quick, I'm going to go ahead and put this on our course setting. I'm doing 15. This is, I'm going to say, should be about 4 cups. And the thing I love again about these start-stop, I can just set the number of cups. And it does it on its own, all by itself. And so in theory, you can also get you a really good, I remember when we upgraded into our grinder, we actually ended up using our grinder to establish our cups. This was before I was weighing out, but I wanted to move away from scooping my coffee. So I would just say, okay, I want 4 cups of coffee, and I would use my grinder set. So this is a great way to help you measure out your coffee. So I'm going to use the manual side. All done. Great. Oh, great question, Benjamin. Benjamin asked the question, does a paper filter make a difference? Thank you, because I could not find my notes once I went Facebook Live on my computer. So I'm kind of winging this a little bit based on my memory. And that was actually something I wanted to talk about. So give me 1 second. I'm going to mention this shortly. So what you do is, once I use the filter that I ground the coffee in, and so what you can see here, and I'll try to move this a little closer, is that you can see kind of how the coffee is much like rocks. It's much bigger versus if you use coffee that you're using as a scoop. And so I want to make sure people understand one of the big difference. So this is, if I pick this up, this feels almost like powder. Not quite powder, but that's the difference between something that's like a powder form when you're using ground for, say, auto drip and almost close to an espresso, versus something that's more, again, kind of bigger, that's more like rocks. So that's why you want to get a grinder, because depending on how you want to brew your coffee, it makes a difference. Let's see. So now we're going to put the coarse coffee in here, and give me one moment. So I'm now going to pour my water in here. And again, this has been simmering just a little bit. Which actually, we're going to get a little bit more water. One thing we forgot about is like, oops, we forget water evaporates. So rather than simmer, I'll put a little more water in there. Oh, and I did forget to use a spoon. Hey, Shannon, can you pass me a spoon right over there? To your left. Boom. Yep. I told you I was still getting used to this, right? So, perfect. Perfect. Thank you. So, what happens is when you put your water in into the French press, you actually want to begin stirring it up immediately, because otherwise you'll have that coffee kind of sitting at the top of it. And so what, in this case, we're going to assume there was more water in here, because as I was talking, the water kind of evaporated a little bit. I was like, I knew something was going to happen on this cause, like something's going to mix. So what we're doing now is, and we're going to kind of turn that bad boy on high heat. So because we wanted to heat really, really fast so we can add it to it. But when you do your French press, you're looking at having this mixed for about, yep, there you go, perfect. You want to go for 4 minutes. So once I put my coffee grounds in here, I enter my water, or I add my water in, and I'm going to set my timer for 4 minutes and just let it go. And so what happens is, over the course of 4 minutes, the water and the coffee is mixing together. And so this is the brew cycle. This is the classic way we used to drink coffee. So we're going to let this just sit here and let it brew. Now, we have our coffee that was ready here. We've learned about how we can grind our coffee, how to store our coffee. Oh, and there was a question asked earlier about filters. So I strongly recommend the unbleached filters here, the brown filters, because you're not using the chemicals to bleach them white. The irony is, I guess, not sure why paper filters need to be bleached white, but you can actually, you actually can use regular brown filters, which again, you just don't get the added chemical compounds into your coffee. So I strongly recommend using brown paper filters, by the way. Also, normally I don't recommend using the metal filters, just so you can make sure over time you don't get that taste in there. Let's see, the metallic taste. How long do you like to bloom your pour over? Good question. So by blooming, when you're pouring the coffee over and you're letting it sit, typically you're looking at about a 4-minute process. So you normally want to let your coffee sit or bloom. So when you're pouring the water over for about 10 seconds, you want to let it sit and bloom for about another good 10 to 15 seconds. And then you're doing it again for about 10 to 15 seconds and letting it sit for another 10 to 15 seconds. And then a third time. You typically do that about 3 times, and then you can go ahead and complete the rest of your process for your pour over. Again, pour overs are mainly used for a single serving, so I don't recommend using pour overs for more than 2 cups, meaning or 2 persons. You typically want to kind of keep it at 16 ounces. Otherwise, you're going to be doing this for a long time. That's why when you go to coffee shops and cafes, they normally use pour overs for just a single serving, and they'll have them all laid out, in a row, because you don't want to, spend so much time doing for one big gigantic, bowl of coffee. So now that we have brewed our cup of coffee, now we're gonna get into the fun part. So we're gonna kind of turn the screen back over a little bit, and we'll come back to our French press once this 4 minutes is up. So I'll put this over here, move this out the way. And so now we're gonna look at kind of brewing this great cup of coffee. So while we're doing this, I'm actually gonna go ahead and show you some more fun on how you can really have some cool tips at home. So this is where you really start having fun. You brewed your coffee, and one of the things about, I'm gonna start with just the basic cup that I'm pouring. when you look at pouring a cup of coffee, like I love looking at the nice brown, dark brown taste. I'm sorry, nice brown look of a cup of coffee. And make sure I can try to pour this without. Okay, that's not gonna work because I'm not gonna pour this on my Mac. But if you can see it, your coffee, believe it or not, is gonna have some air bubbles. So can you see those little air bubbles that are right there? Another tip to great coffee. Those air bubbles actually shows you how fresh your coffee is. Why? Because coffee gives off natural gas. And so when you roast coffee, when the coffee's roasted and it's going through the process, it gives off certain gases, which is why when you buy your coffee beans, you have these coffee beans. Oh, that's our timer right there, by the way, for the French press. Real quick, I'm gonna come right back to the bubbles. So at this moment, 4 minutes is up. I'm simply gonna press my coffee filter down, the plunger down, and to now I'm ready to start pouring my coffee. And that is how you're enjoying your French press. Again, same ratio of what we taught before. But going back to the air bubbles, those air bubbles, they give off gases. Your coffee gives off gases, so that when you buy your bag of coffee, you actually want to make sure that the bag you have, it has a one-way air valve in it. Why? Because early on in our entrepreneurial journey, I didn't realize the importance of having an airbag, and I may have had a coffee bag burst on me, and that's not fun because it kind of was like, how in the world does a coffee bag explode? So most coffee companies already know this, but when you get a bag of coffee from beyucoffee.com, we're proud that we do have a one-way air valve, so this releases the gas. And what's nice about a one-way valve is that the air goes out, but no air comes in. And that's important because you do not want to expose your coffee beans to air. So back to that earlier question about how long can ground coffee last and fresh coffee last, it can actually last up to 3 months as long as it's air sealed tight and you're not letting light and you're not letting air inside of it. So I'm actually gonna go ahead and start heating up some milk because we're gonna show you how to make a latte and a cafe au lait at the house. So one thing you can do, if we have a little milk pitcher, but you can get just a regular small pot and go ahead and heat the milk up on your stove. So you don't need, let's say, the fancy pitcher, but you can do it with a pot. But once you brew the perfect cup of coffee, how do you want to enjoy it? Like, I know some people say, yeah, I like it nice and dark, but there are a lot of different ways of how you can enjoy your coffee. And this is kind of where some of the tips comes in. One is sugar. If you're going to use sugar, we do recommend trying brown sugar. And the reason why we say brown raw sugar versus white sugar is, again, the chemical compounds, is you're getting the natural taste of sugarcane, as opposed to the chemical compounds that's used to bleach sugar. So we always recommend that if you're going to use sugar, to use brown sugar, unless you want to use, extracts, whether it's a Splenda, I don't know, old schoolers in here using Sweet and Low, but for your calorie reasons. But again, use what you like. I think that's the one thing too. I go back into, if you haven't tried it, maybe try brown sugar or sugar in the raw. And if you want to go back, go back. Other things of what to use in coffee: cinnamon and nutmeg. So one thing about coffee from around the world, again, we're talking about something that's been around for, again, over 1,000 years. Man, you can use all sorts of stuff. We recommend trying a little bit of nutmeg or cinnamon in your coffee if you haven't tried it. Spices are one of the unique ways that can bring out some flavor in coffees that you may not have known. Also, I recommend maybe trying either an orange zest or even lemon. Lemon is another one that a little squeeze of lemon, which, believe it or not, is actually how the General Napoleon, the French General Napoleon Bonaparte used to enjoy his coffee. He actually used to enjoy it with lemon. So that's actually one of those little secrets that a lot of people in Europe enjoy their coffee and their espresso with lemon. And organic honey was a question from Ernest. Recco. recommended from Ernest. Yes. So yes, I actually have honey in my cabinet that I also use because also for those of you who want to, if you're trying to watch calories, honey is a good alternative instead of sugar because you can get the sweetness of your coffee without having to necessarily put as much in it as you may on sugar. So for those of you, myself included, that have a sweet tooth, that's one that I've also used as well as using honey. And it also adds a different flavor. One that you may not know instead of honey, and this, Ernest, if you like honey, you may want to try maple syrup. Maple syrup is actually another great recommendation for people that want to try using sweeteners. So those are just some of the sweeteners that we are recommending where you can use honey, maple syrup, or some of the artificial sugars. Spices with the grounds, or you can ask the question, Shannon. What was the question on that one?
April wants to know, what about spices with the ground or after the brew?
Ooh, good question, April. So I will say I've been one place where they actually put pecans in with their coffee when they ground it up, and it tasted great. However, I normally recommend do not use spices in your grounds because you don't want to damage the flavor of your grinder or your air pot. Now, you can use it if you want to in your coffee pot as long as you're doing a good job of using the white vinegar to clean the coffee pot that we talked about earlier. So again, I recommend everyone that I think it's after roughly 25, 30 different, roughly 15 to 20 different brews. You just want to go ahead and clean your coffee. But that's one that I do recommend. You can use spices for your air in your coffee pot versus after if you're cleaning it on a consistent basis. So thank you. I know it's a little hot. So Shannon has helped us on getting the milk froth on it, and so this little puppy is one of the greatest little things you can get for under $10 on Amazon or any place else. It is a milk frother. Man, we use this bad boy like crazy during the summer months because you can do it with skim milk to make those little what they call it. You want to do like an ice cappuccino basically. You use the milk frother after heating up your milk or when it's hot. And so let me try to shim this over. Yep. So by pressing the button, I'm basically creating this froth method here. And for those that don't know, this is really, sorry. All right, so we weren't sure what was gonna happen, but okay. So you hit this thing and this thing just kind of vibrates real quickly. And so I'm putting this inside of the milk, and you only have to do it for a couple of seconds. And then what I recommend is also, you always want to kind of tap to get the bubbles out. And then you have, if you can see that one, nice froth for your milk. So this is actually called a cafe au lait. Cafe au lait, which you see at the coffee shops, is nothing but coffee with cream in French. So if you brew yourself a pot of coffee, you pour halfway or even maybe 2/3 with coffee. And Shannon, can I try you for one more spoon, please?
Sure.
Then when I stir up my milk, get ready for this. Then all you do is simply pour over. And you have a nice little Olay right there. Now, depending on if you get you a really nice dark roast coffee and you're doing especially even with a K-cup, you can do this with your K-cup and you really are kind of making yourself a latte. And so this is where you can kind of get your cinnamon and do a little bit of a sprinkle on top. And then voila, you have a very nice, cool beverage that you can enjoy. And this, it's perfect. It's spoon. So let me show you what's so cool about this, right? Just so you see, this is the froth that comes out from a milk frother. Like I said, that one of the best inventions you're ever gonna get. So if you love cappuccinos, love lattes, I strongly recommend, getting a milk frother. And then my favorite for the last couple of minutes is I recommend this again. The cold brew mixed with the Baileys is a great addition. Those of you who don't know what Kahlua is a coffee liqueur. Liqueurs are less in alcohol content than your regular liquors, or regular spirits. So when you're thinking about bourbon or rum, those are typically at 35-40%. These, on the other hand, 20% alcohol, or this is 17% alcohol. So it's much lighter in alcohol content. So you don't have to worry about necessarily getting tipsy on Baileys. However, these are great for use if you ever want to enjoy something in the evening. Recommend one of our signature decaf. You can enjoy a good heart and soul decaf blend in the evening along with Baileys, and this way you don't have to worry about the caffeine. So you can enjoy a really good nightcap with Baileys, with Kahlua, or Jameson's cold brew, and just sit back and relax. So again, I want to thank everybody, man, for just joining with me. I know we're kind of rounding up, so I'm gonna open it up for Q&A. But again, definitely check us out at beyucoffee.com. And that big promo tip, by the way, is if you go on beyucoffee.com and order coffee between, I think, the next 24 hours right now, you will get 25% off on your purchase of coffee. And there's free shipping. So just so you know, beyucoffee.com, beyucoffee.com. And yeah, we'll do this again now that I'm not quite as nervous. Let's see, repeat the French press coffee water ratio. Good question. So the same thing with the water ratio will always be 2 tablespoons of coffee per 6 ounces of water. So if you're using your grinder to grind your coffee on a coarse setting for French press, you can still use your trusted scoop to do 2 tablespoons per 6 ounces of water. So if you're gonna do a 12 ounce mug or a 16 ounce mug, just do, say 12, you do 12 ounces, 2 of these scoops, and then just boil that water and make your French press. Is 15 the coarsest grind from Terry? Good question. No, it is not actually. It actually goes up to 18. And so that's where early on we were saying you want to, 15 is in the middle, 15 and 16 is in the middle. And I always recommend start off in the middle and see if you need to go up or go down. If you go up in the coarse level, just know the coffee's not going to be as strong. And if you go down, it'll be stronger. So that's where you start off in the middle, see how you enjoy it, and then see if you want to change the grind level. Because the beauty of coffee and the science behind it, water ratio and grind setting, they both can change the taste of the coffee. So that's why I always say stick with your 2 tablespoons or the ratio of, if you're going to weigh it out, of 1 gram of coffee per 17 grams of water. Once you get that part down, you go for it. Oh, and I saw someone who says, Shirley, you say you love the Mexican coffee. Guess what? If you do a French press or you do a coffee, you buy a little bit of chocolates. You can get some chocolate syrup. Again, get some chocolate from Food Lions, Harris Teeter. You put it at the bottom of the cup. You pour your coffee on there, stir up the coffee with the syrup, add a little bit of nutmeg, and there's a little other secret ingredient, but I guarantee you will enjoy that at home. That's very similar to a Mexican coffee. Doing that chocolate syrup, adding the coffee, add a little bit of cinnamon, add a little bit of nutmeg, and you're good to go. We use cinnamon syrup at the cafe, but you can get cinnamon syrup in some places as well, and you can make a Mexican coffee every day at the house. So with that, man, I want to thank everybody for joining me for my first virtual event. Hopefully it wasn't too brutal. And yeah, please feel free to buy coffee at beyucoffee.com, beyucoffee.com. And again, the promo cup for that 25% off, the code is BU Cup, BEYUCUP. Again, that's BU Cup, BEYUCUP, and that'll get you 25% off plus free shipping already. Shannon, did I miss anything else as you're writing out?
Can you buy coffee in a store, in a cafe?
Good question. Yes, as of Friday, you can now come inside the cafe. We are doing only to-go service only. We haven't opened up for dine-in because of COVID. But yes, you can come into the cafe to buy coffee as well. And again, everybody, please continue to stay safe. You know, most importantly, we're seeing the COVID cases are continuing to rise. So more than anything, man, it's been fun to really connect with everyone as if we're in the cafe, because I really do miss seeing so many familiar faces. But most importantly, please stay safe out here in these streets. With that, man, everybody have a beautiful holidays. Please buy coffee. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us at info@beyucafe.com. And outside of that, y'all have a great day.